All right, I think we're live now. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Why Read, episode number 6. And tonight I am joined by 3 lovely ladies. And so, starting off, I'll just go clockwise from where I am. So, we have Angela and from Literature Science Alliance. Hi, Angela.
Hey.
Nice to have you on my channel. I don't think I've had you on my channel yet. So,
No, we've been together on different lives, but not on either of our channels. I think actually we were both on Brittany's channel.
that's right. That's
Or
right.
maybe that
Yes.
wasn't a live, it was recorded, but yeah.
Either way, a chat where we got to talk. So, and wonderful to have you. And then we also have Evie from She Was Only Evie. Hi, Evie.
And my cat, apparently.
Oh, cute. We love cats.
Yes.
And actually everyone in this chat has a cat. So that's cool. And then we have the lovely Brittany from Books with Brittany. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you again.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is the show called Why Read because the nature of the show is to start off at least with this question, why read? And with that question, it's not necessarily a why read origin story. You can go there if you want to, but it's more about right now in your life, what purpose is reading serving you? And so, Angela, I'll start with you. I know you talked about this in a recent video, but I'd love to hear.
Well, it's not even like I've even come up with an answer since then. It's like this is very timely because I've been questioning why I read lately. Not that I'm quitting reading on any level. It's just more like this reading year has been, I think, both like my biggest number of books year, but also the least satisfying year I've had in a really long time. And I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong, I guess, because it can't be all the books. Like, you know, I'm not picking the right ones or I'm sticking with some so long. But I think at the core, why I read is the same reason why I consume any stories, and that is to get a new memory, a memory that I couldn't achieve on my own per se or something like that. It's to be a part of a story. And that all started like with musicals and things like that. And then once I could read, everyone in my family reads, and then it became this nostalgia thing, right? And where it's just like this cozy little escape. So sometimes it's escapism and being part of a story, but other times it is to be challenged, to be a part of a different world. So it's, you know, it's not one thing. But I do think I have been neglecting the fun side of reading for myself lately, that I haven't let myself just find books that make me stay up till 3 a.m. I am desperately wanting that book. I don't know where it is. I'm about to reread Love Hypothesis or A Court of Mist and Fury. I don't know where the book is. But yeah.
But so that's yeah. I love that though, about creating memories from other stories. That's a unique answer, actually. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, well, because when I was doing that video earlier this week, I was thinking, it's like, I don't actually care if I remember a character name or a plot beat or something. I like remembering reading the book. Does that make sense? Like, whenever we talk about favorites and stuff, it's like, I remember that moment when I was in this part of my life, and this book was a big memory in that part of my life for reasons I can't explain, you know? Like, when you get to a time of year and it's like, man, I read this book last year and that made me so X, and I want to do that again.
Yeah, I know you were talking about that in your last video too, because you've been through a lot of things this last year. You were talking about, you know, you defended your dissertation, so congratulations. And that was a huge event, obviously, but then you moved and then you got COVID. So all these things were happening. And it's just interesting to look back at what you were reading at those times and whether those events affected what you read. So I just thought that was absolutely fascinating, just to associate, and what you were just saying just now, just associating different memories of what was happening on certain days with what you're reading. Yeah, that's a really cool thing we could expand on here too. But Evie, what about you? Why do you read?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to take Angela's answer for me, it's I don't read for fun. I read. I make it hard for myself. In all seriousness, though, I like to be challenged. I like to have what I call a dialogue with the text. So whether it be like thematic discussions or just characters feeling like I'm having a catharsis, aka with fits. So I just like kind of having that outlet. I guess you could call it escapism, but I'm not escaping to just like, oh, be a part of the story. I'm escaping to find other parts of myself. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, if you're
No, it
using the word
does.
escapism, it's not the way we all use it. I can't give you an escapism book. You'll DNF that very fast.
Miracle Empire, right?
That is so funny. Yeah, I can kind of relate to that, Evie. I'm a little bit like you in that sense. But yeah, I think like escapism, that's like a whole interesting topic too that we can talk about too, because I think there's, I remember talking about this in the Moody Reader Tag a year ago, how I feel like there's escapism as in, I really hate my life right now, or I don't like what's happening right now. It's stressful and I just want to escape into a different world. So I go into a book. But there could also be an escapism of just like, everything is great right now and I just want to explore more in a book. I don't know. Like it's not necessarily trying to get away from reality as much as it's like just adding to the richness or fabric of your life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool. And Brittany, what about you?
I really like both of your guys' answers, actually. I kind of made like a little list when I was thinking about this. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I read is actually something I just thought of while you guys were talking right now, which is a little bit weird. I think I read to learn a lot now. And obviously my reading tastes and why I read has changed drastically over the years. But, that doesn't just mean like I'm reading nonfiction to learn. Of course, I like reading nonfiction, but I think I love reading because I gain so many different perspectives through what I'm reading that I don't necessarily get in my day-to-day life. So getting those perspectives, and then we all have the part of us, I think, at least a little bit to some degree, that reads in order to relate to different experiences as well, because it's comforting to see what you've gone through in a fictional or nonfiction book, to just know you're not alone. So I think that's a big part. And then the one that I thought of when you guys were talking is I think I just read to feel something. Like, because I was talking about watching Breaking Bad again. And I'm like, I hate this show. I hate this show, but I love it. I'm like the biggest fan. I'm like, why do you say you love this show? But I'm like, because it makes me feel something the whole time. So reading is kind of like that for me. It's like, whether it's something like Evie said, where I'm really trying to challenge myself, if it makes me feel something, I'm generally having a good time with it. So.
Wow, that's a really good point. Yeah.
No, I mean, like, I read a book recently that really encapsulated it, where it was a challenging read, where I learned stuff. It was Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende, but it was also like an emotional gut punch. It was both perfect things of like, I was completely in the story where I wanted to be, and I was learning and being challenged. And like, those books are so special.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And the neat thing too is that the three of you, I think one thing that's also really special about the three of you is that I think all three of you tend to read from different genres. And I always appreciate that about your channels. And I actually be curious because obviously this corner of BookTube is very filled with a lot of fantasy, I think. And a lot of you, maybe that was your entryway into BookTube, perhaps. And I'd just like to hear some of that journey as well. And I think I'm going to start the other direction this time. So with Brittany, I especially would love to hear you start off this conversation, because I know that you took kind of a long break from fantasy and are coming back to it again. But what has it been like for you to explore all the Booker lists and books and all the different literary fiction books you've been reading, and then coming back to fantasy?
It's been really good to open my eyes to a whole new like world of reading. And I sort of did the same thing I did with fantasy, where I took all of the recommendations from prize winners or really popular booktubers, and I did the same thing I did with fantasy, where I wasn't necessarily choosing things I liked because I didn't know what I liked yet. And so once I finally let go of like, okay, you don't have to like the popular things, I really feel like I was able to learn what I like more, and I'm able to ignore some of like the stronger influences, I think. But yeah, I really burnt myself out on fantasy, and I don't know if it's from reading, like forcing myself to finish so many series, or if it was just putting pressure on myself from BookTube. No one ever put pressure on me, like totally myself. And just allowing myself to have the break from that and read other things. And even right now, like I'm reading a romance right now, and it's just great because it's just like there's nobody cares, you know, like nobody cares when I'm reading. And so I'm reading only for myself right now. And it's just like such a freeing feeling being able to choose any book or any genre that you want to and not feel like confined to one space.
Did you feel like you had any pressure to read for other people before, or?
I think that it's hard because I want to be really clear that there's no person or like group of people that made me feel that. But I think when it comes to like channel analytics and you see what's popular and you see what performs well and you see numbers, like all of it sort of does play a role, whether I wanted to admit it or not. So I know that's influenced my book choices in the past, definitely. And I haven't filmed anything in, I think, almost 2 months at this point, and feeling no pressure. I'm definitely not choosing the same things, or it's a little bit easier to be like, that's not necessarily for me.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. And I love hearing your journey with that, because I know that I think there have been some channels in the past. I remember seeing one person who took a long break from BookTube and came back and said, I took a year off of BookTube and here's what I learned. And I think that that's interesting because we don't realize how much we're influenced by each other or influenced by numbers and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
I remember sending you the message being like, I wonder what it will be like to go into the bookstore after watching like very minimal BookTube channels and being like, what is there? Like, what is going to be in the bookstore? I have no idea. And I still haven't done it, but I will tell you when I do it. And it's going to be the greatest feeling because I'm not going to know what anything is. And I'm just going to be able to look at the bookstore and be like, wow, you know, like it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's wonderful to have that. I think that's fantastic. Yeah. What about you, Evie? Because you're very well read with classical literature is the impression I've always gotten. You could let me know if I'm wrong about that, but you talked a lot about Frankenstein and Pride and Prejudice author Jane Austen. I cannot think. What's that?
That's her tattoo.
Persuasion, Wuthering Heights, and Frankenstein.
So you've come from quite a classical background. How did you find BookTube? Because you're mostly interacting with so many of us fantasy people here, and I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I'm don't worry, I will answer your question, but I'm going to go way back. So I'm actually not as well read in classics as I seem to be. Basically, those three are the ones that I read religiously. But I really, other than Dragonlance Chronicles and Legends, I didn't read any fantasy until BookTube. And I started getting into BookTube 3 years ago, 2019. And I think I actually started off on, oddly enough, like AuthorTube stuff, looking at writing, and then that morphed into BookTube. Not that I'm a writer, I'm a wannabe, but I haven't written a word. So, but yeah, and then that just morphed into BookTube, and I, for whatever reason, the AuthorTube channels that I was watching, all the fantasy booktubers were being recommended, like Murphy and Daniel and, you know, Elliot and all them. And so I just started watching them like, well, I haven't read anything, so I guess I gotta read some stuff. And oddly enough, I just went into the bookstore. I'm like, I need to read a fantasy. Let's go to the fantasy section. And the first fantasy book / series that I read was the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. And Angela, I know that you're like, how do you like this?
It's fine. No, it's just so funny because I know Evie's taste now, and if Evie picked up that series today, it would be a very different experience.
True. Well, I mean, that kind of goes back to what you were saying before, Angela. Like, it's really books at a certain time and place in your life can have a different impact on you. And even now, like when I read, you know, a favorite book or even a book that I liked from 5 years ago, if I reread it, the place and time that I'm at currently could change my perspective and the way that I approach that book and the way that I consume it and enjoy it. And I like that. So
wait, did you have a bad experience
with Shades of Magic? Oh no, I loved it. So
wow. Okay.
It's in her top 10.
What?
Exactly.
I wouldn't say now. Actually, yeah, no, it would be in my top 10 because I haven't read that many.
You've written this in a comment on my video. I have proof. I will go find it.
All right. You bring up the receipts and share screen. So,
That's so
no.
funny.
I mean, admittedly, I haven't read that many series, so it definitely would be in my top 10. But the more that I read, the more I'm like, oh, this is actually not even objectively, but like technically not that great. But from a nostalgic perspective, I'm like, this is what got me back into fantasy. I'm gonna love it.
Yeah.
No ifs, ands, or buts. So
I'm just and just so people know in the chat, I'm just surprised because I know Evie's taste really well. I feel like, yeah, and so does Angela. And I'm like thinking that's like the last series I would recommend to Evie.
Like she doesn't like City of Brass. She doesn't like any other fantasy that people who like that series likes. Like that's what I'm saying. Like if you like this, try that does not work for this.
That is so funny.
sorry.
That's okay. I'm just gonna quickly look at comments really quickly. And hi, Kevin. I'm so excited. You're about to finish the Crippled God. I've been telling him to update me. And hello. And a lot of excitement over that. Hi, everyone. First time watching Why Read. Well, thank you. Welcome.
Yay.
Everybody's happy for Kevin.
By the way, what do you guys
Just
do to my
making this
cat?
whole
That's a
like
big accomplishment. I just finished book 12 in Wheel of Time today, and I'm like, man, I've been here a while.
That is funny.
Chugging along at it.
You're right, though. Gathering Storm was pretty good, Brittany. It's a pretty good book.
I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that.
Well, it's Egwene's book, and I like Egwene. She's like one of the few characters that I can actually say I like. There's not too many buts. I like her.
Yeah.
And then Anita said that it went downhill after that. Anita has some pretty spicy opinions about books, though.
I mean, she's not wrong.
She's really
No.
not wrong. She's
Thanks
not.
for doing this. Thank you for everybody who's a first-time watcher to this series. Welcome. And Angela, what about you? Reading diverse genres. I really appreciate it. I love that. You always have so many interesting recommendation videos, including you had one recently, or it wasn't so recent now, but one on, I think, Latin American authors or books. And that made me so excited because I feel like I don't read enough Latin American books.
Well, that's probably what got me close to BookTube. So like I've been a voracious reader a long time, and then grad school I got to get back into it because as my commute reminded me today, I have a long commute. And I was reading on my commute to work because I was finally done listening to the same music, and I'm too old to find new music, so I was done with that, and podcasts weren't doing it. So I got back into reading. And I would go to the bookstore, and I'd already read all of the things. And then I was like, I haven't read anything by a South American author in my favorite genre. And this was back in like 2015 or so, and there was nothing. This was before Sylvia Moreno Garcia. There was literally nothing. People would send me, like I went on Reddit to ask. I was like in the fantasy subreddit, and people were like, have you tried 100 Years of Solitude? Which I'm like, I know that's not actually fantasy. Like it's magical realism. Like I know that's a different thing. Like I'm talking epic fantasy with magic, like like there was a specific genre I was looking for, and as it stands, we're not getting our first one South American by a South American author till next year. That's Sun and Void from Orbit, and that kind of put me down a rabbit hole. And then one day while watching board game YouTube, because there is a part of YouTube that is smaller than BookTube, and that's board game YouTube. And one day it recommended to me one of the popular booktubers videos, and then I realized there is BookTube. And they were listing all the series you should read. I'm like, I've read all of those. Why is no one talking about new things? And so then I was like, well, I'll just buy a stupid webcam and I'll talk about things and try to find diverse books that I really like. And that's basically it. And it's actually really funny. For most people, the algorithm helps them when they talk about Brandon Sanderson. The algorithm hates when I talk about Brandon Sanderson, which is so ridiculous because he's like one of my favorite authors. But whenever I film anything about it, it's like, no one wants this from you, Angela. Don't talk about this.
What? Why do you think that is? That's crazy.
I do think that naturally the audience I've curated already knows about Brandon Sanderson, has already read it, doesn't care, doesn't really, like I just think the audience I've curated, they don't want to hear about the very popular books, which is great. But it's also like sometimes I want to yell about my favorite popular things.
Yeah.
So it's been a nice place though, because it means that a lot of the toxicity that comes about talking about really popular books has somehow evaded me. because I hear a lot how people have to deal with things in their comments. And like in general, my comment section is like the best place. The only thing that bums me out is my short story recommendation videos and my Latinx videos always tank, but I refuse to stop doing them. But it's always like, it does worse than my standalone book review videos. And if you make BookTube, you know that standalone review videos, those are normally the ones that you post for yourself. And you're like, I know this is like, it's going to see it.
You know that the short story videos are purely just for me.
I know. Evie has a whole shelf of our impending buddy reads for the end of time. So I don't know. I love BookTube though, and how I found it, and like, I don't know. It's been really fun. And how I found channels was looking for those recommendations though, like Yogi with the Book, Perpetual Pages. Those are like my 2 channels where I get all of my Latinx representation from. All the Black authors I found are from Ninjiri and then Thistle and Verse. Like I would literally just go into the search bar and be like, point blank, I want to find books by Black authors or Latinx authors and stuff like that. So
Yeah. That's
that's
fantastic.
how I started.
Yeah.
And I get all my recommendations from Angela. So
Yeah, and I tell her when not to read books, and then she still goes and buys The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, even though you're not going to like it.
listen, the cover of the second book just really does something for me, okay?
Haven't we always learned not to judge a book by its cover? Brittany, how many books have you bought based off their cover?
Oh, so many. 2 in my DNF pile right now.
I just want to experience her arms. Who is it?
Terrain's arms are amazing.
Okay, Terrain. There you go.
Terrain's in the first book. Luca's on the second book, if you care.
Luca's on the cover of the second one, I'm assuming. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yep.
Even if I don't like The Unbroken, I will read The Faithless.
I see your Roger's in the chat, and Roger and you, Angela, have made me interested in The Jasmine Throne, which is a book I don't know that I would normally pick up, and I don't know if I will or when, but both of you have me interested. Because
why do you think it's a book you wouldn't pick up? Because this isn't a thing a lot of people have said where I'm like, but this is like the type of epic political fantasy I know these people like. Is it the cover? Like, what's happening?
I think it is. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I know the reason I'm curious about it is because it's Indian culture, right? So we get an Indian fantasy. It's the author is Indian, right? And
she might be Indian American. I don't know if she's diaspora or not, but yes, Southeast America, Southeast Asia.
I really liked her first book. I didn't read the sequel. The Jasmine. No.
Empire of Sand is her first book.
No.
Oh,
that was her debut.
Yeah,
and that's a fantasy romance. That's not a fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know why. I
just want to know because it's not just you. There are a lot of people where I'm like, but you like this type of fantasy. That is what this is.
Because you've said that it's like military fantasy and political intrigue.
It's not military fantasy. It's more like it's political epic fantasy with a lot of commentary on religion and politics and rebellion and resistance. And the first book's kind of more
Sun is the military one, right?
She Who Became the Sun's more military.
Of the lesbian sapphic trifecta, right?
The Unbroken is also more military. Jasmine Throne is less military.
Okay.
But it's just so good. Josh, but I think what happens is people see the cover and they think there's going to be more romance than there is. And like romance is like an anti-buzzword for so many people, which fair. I'm not taking away people's anti-buzzwords. They're helpful, but this isn't romance.
I'm not against romance. It's just the way the cover looks. It does seem romance to me. I don't know why, but it's the juxtaposition of a romance-focused epic fantasy. For some reason, that just hurts my brain. It just doesn't. It seems like there's some kind of dissonance with me with romance-focused epic fantasy. If it's a fantasy romance, that's different.
Yeah.
But if it's epic fantasy with romance being at the center, I don't know why. It
doesn't even have romance at the center. That's what I'm saying. Like people think it does. There is a romance element, but that's not the plot or the focus or the intrigue or anything.
Is it like a secondary plot, or is it like even a tertiary plot?
A tertiary, probably, maybe secondary, but it's like it's not. I don't know how to explain it, but like it's not the focus. Like it happens because naturally, based off who these characters are, that's where it would go. But it's not the centerpiece. I would never give this to a romance lover because they would be completely unsatisfied. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that really helps a lot. I'm so hyped
Oh,
for
Sun in the
this.
I'm gonna love that book even if I hate it, guys. Straight up.
Hey, Andrew, nice to see you. And Philip right now is reading A Touch of Light by Thiago Abdallah, who's from Brazil. So I understand Thiago. I think that's how you say his name, Thiago, and not Thiago. That's what somebody said. So I've been going with that. Hope I'm saying it right. I did read that and reviewed that. And
I believe that with the THs.
Yeah,
you are, Matt. You're pretty great. 10 out of 10.
I will say I am the 1% of Andrew's comment section that's negative. So
Why was I just saying I need to know? I don't know why you're saying. I love The Unbroken more than I should, and I know that, but I don't care. I'm like this close from actually formulating an email to send to CL Clark being like, how do you feel about doing an interview on my channel? We'll see if I do it.
I'm trying to block these bots, and I think I'm screwing something up. Sorry.
You have to do it like multiple times, I think, before they like get the hint that they're not allowed anymore.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I accidentally blocked anybody I didn't mean to block. I think I might have done that by accident. Okay. All right. So we got people excited about the Jasmine Throne. Just catching up here for a second. I think you would like it. Themes, cool magic, strong female characters, actual adult romance. Okay. I'm not anti-romance, like I said, but Angela, you explained that very well.
I mean, Joanna, you did read The Vanished Birds, which has a romance element to it. It is definitely not even secondary or tertiary, but there is a romance there.
That's true.
I will say for this group of people, for every single one of you of the Sapphic trifecta, I would have recommended the Jasmine Throne over any of the other ones.
You got Dr. Fantasy to want to read the Jasmine Throne, so nice pitch.
I honestly don't ever know when our tastes align, so that one's on you. I hope you like it. I spend a lot of time with my friends trying to align tastes. Like Roger and I have been buddy reading a lot lately, and I've been like, okay, you're going to give Live Ship like a 4 out of 5.
You're good at predicting books for people, Angela. Like whether they're going to like them or not.
Yeah. I'm still scared about you and Mask of Mirrors.
Yeah. Do you know what the last thing you said to me about it was?
that yeah, you're allowed to DNF it for sure.
Yeah. I've DNF'd it for now. Yeah.
Like no, that's totally fair. I was just like, I don't know if you're ready. This is quite a fantasy to jump back in, but maybe.
Good. It's so good, but my brain and the political parts right now, there's too many things going on. So I'm like, pause, pick up a romance. That's what I did.
Which romance? I wanted to ask you.
Oh, go ahead.
I think it's called It Begins With Us. It's like the sequel to It Ends With Us.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
Are you liking it?
Yeah. I don't want to put it down whenever I pick it up.
Oh, that's exciting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did read It Ends With Us, the first book.
Yeah. So if you like that book, like, I think you'll like continuing the story.
Yeah. Every now and then I get like a little bit of an itch for a romance, and then I just don't do it. So maybe BookTube is influencing that.
I always regret it. Like right now, I'm in halfway through Half a Soul, and I regret that I haven't picked it up in 4 days because I've been reading 2 900-page epic fantasies because I have no sense of balance in my life.
Yeah. So Brittany, I'd be curious because I know the fantasy burnout has been a real thing, and I think that happens to some people. I have another friend who's here in the chat. He was earlier. I don't think he is anymore. Who's having a little bit of epic fantasy burnout potentially. But do you think there's any specific convention in fantasy that is kind of pulling you out and draining your energy whenever you pick up a fantasy? Like, is it world building or is it certain tropes? Is there anything in particular?
So like things that I like the least, I guess, when I'm reading, you mean? I do not like a lot of action or battle scenes. Like it just, I'm not a visual reader. I can't picture what's happening. So it's just a whole bunch of words to me. And I can't ever see what's going on. So if it's really action heavy, I mean, I do my best, but it kind of like takes me out of it. That being said, like I love the way Joe Abercrombie does action. So it's not always, so like if something is described as military, I'm just mostly not going to pick it up. Like even Hyperion being one of my favorite books, the military section of it was still like not a real great time for me. Those things. And then I think really it's totally dependent on when I'm reading the book, not just, what stage of my life, but like if I'm on a vacation if I'm on a break, if it's a normal work week. And like me doing eating disorder recovery right now is like completely life consuming. And so I don't have 2 brain cells to use for reading a book. So that's why I'm just like, I have to go with something that's so light and easy to consume. But yeah, when I am full capacity thinking, which to be honest, has not been any of the time that I've been having a channel because of the eating disorder, really the military in action makes it go downhill for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been really struggling lately with very action heavy type of books. And that seems to be a very common thing right now in especially modern fantasy. I've just noticed a lot of let's get to the beats faster and faster and faster. And I'm like, I just need to breathe. I need the story to breathe a little bit.
The Jasmine Throne.
It'll give a subtitle of this Why Read episode. Read the Jasmine Throne.
Why read this the Jasmine Throne, right?
Why read the Jasmine Throne?
Is it too military for me?
The Jasmine Throne doesn't have military. That's what I'm saying. I don't know where this came from. It doesn't have that.
I swear to God, I was listening. I swear to
No,
God.
it's okay. It's because the Sapphic Trifecta has 2 military fantasies.
Okay.
But the Jasmine Throne is not military in the first book. And I wouldn't even say it's military in the second, but like you can have a stronger argument that it's adjacent. But the first one does not. I don't know. Sorry, I will derail this into making everyone read my favorite books. That's what I come on the internet to do. That's why the question isn't why did we make a booktube channel? Hey, Ellen. But I made a booktube channel to ferociously recommend books to people on a daily basis.
And then I'll say yes, and then Alan will start yelling at me in the chat, you don't read anything I recommend, when I actually do. Yeah, that's funny. So what about you all? Do you all have any like buzzkill words? I know you sometimes talk about buzzwords in your videos, Angela. Do you have any buzzkill words?
Yes. Quest. I don't like quests.
Really?
I dislike quests with a passion, especially if it's a traveling quest. The idea of getting the MacGuffin to do the thing to save the day is like never been my thing. Like
So
even
you
when I
don't
was
like
a kid.
Assassin's Quest? Is that what I'm
Yeah,
hearing?
that's fast.
You didn't like that?
Assassin's Quest is currently not my favorite Robin Hobb, sure, but that's honestly not why. I think she actually did a good job with portraying that quest. But no, like that was always one of my things. I think part of it could be that when I got into fantasy with Harry Potter and his Dark Materials and other ones like Bailey School Kids, it was either Monster of the Week or like it was a school setting or it was a more contained story. And so for me, the fantasy didn't come from the traveling. It came from a lot of like internal places and a lot of friendship development, which can happen in a quest story, but in a lot of fantasy I've read with quest stories, I get very bored very easily because I'm not a visual reader. And so the scenery is not there. The scenery does nothing for me. And we're just walking for a really long time.
Mm-hmm. This is so interesting. So you're not a visual reader. Brittany's not a visual reader. Evie, are you a visual reader? You said you weren't.
No.
Wow.
Aphantasia Club.
Except me, I'm a visual reader. I am a visual reader. I don't know. I mean, I've always been able to do it for some reason. Like ever since I was in elementary school, I just remember being able to just vividly picture things. And I don't really understand it, but it's not the only thing. Sometimes I'm not as much a visual reader. Like I feel like nowadays it's something I can almost like turn on and off to some extent, but I find that a lot of times I have more fun when I'm visualizing things. And Matt says he's a hyper visual reader. Yeah, it does make a difference though. I think it makes a difference in what you attend to in a story.
Yeah.
I will make a caveat that it depends upon the prose. Like Robin Hobb's prose, like I'm reading Cloven Hooves right now. And it's just the way that she describes everything through the prose. I feel very present in the story and like in the scene, but I can't really visualize it like in detail. But things like, sorry, Angela, Brandon Sanderson, who describes everything to a T. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, and I get bored, to be honest. If it's overly described,
Yeah.
I'm like, I because I can't really visualize it, in that way, I don't really enjoy it. So
Did you know Robin Hobb has aphantasia?
really,
And so does Mark Lawrence. I mean, he didn't say that, but I tweeted something about that Why Read episode I did, and then Michael R. Fletcher retweeted my tweet and talked about how well he visualizes Mark Lawrence books, that he can't drive while listening to the audiobooks because he's driving in a movie, basically. And then Mark Lawrence tweeted back and he said, that's great because I don't visualize anything I write. So
that's interesting, especially after reading a lot of his books.
yeah. Yeah, I haven't read anything by him yet. I have the one that you recommended, Brittany.
Yeah, it's very visual.
Oh, I'm excited to read it. And so I asked him how he feels when people do fan art then, since he doesn't visualize what he writes. And he said he loves it. Like, he really appreciates the fan art, but he doesn't visualize what he writes.
Actually, side note, Joanna, I'm really excited for you to read that book because I somewhat struggled throughout that series because of not being able to visualize what he was describing, even though it was described. So you'll have to let me know when you're reading it.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited too. Right now, I'm currently reading, I'm reading a couple of books, but I'm reading Blood Meridian by McCarthy. And man, his descriptions are phenomenal. Like, they're so vivid to me. So vivid. They're pretty brutal and pretty gruesome. It's a pretty dark and harrowing book, but it's incredible. I do love visual stuff for sure.
Yeah, for me, like I'm sure it's different for every person. So even though I don't visualize when I read, I still am in a scene. It's just a different experience, I guess I would say. Like, what immerses me is less the physical descriptions of the world, but how people react to their world, right? It's less about what this looks like, but if what it looks like reminds them of something, that's important to me. If they have like a smell or a taste or an emotional connection to where they are, it's like, that's something that'll put me in the scene. And then oddly enough, for some reason, I find a lot of comfort in reading physical text because it becomes my weird structure. Because like aphantasia comes on a spectrum. I don't create the scene. Yeah. If I've played like a video game or seen a movie, I can sometimes pull a memory scaffolding and like kind of sort of have like an idea. So like I have like my eyesight's really bad. So essentially it's like my eyesight without corrective vision is like a blurry landscape I'm going through.
Yeah.
So like that's how it works. But I get really cozy in dialogue. So sometimes when people are like, this was too dialogue heavy, I'm like, oh, so I should put that on the TBR. And like
it's interesting because I know Steven Erikson said in a recent video in an interview that for him world building is about how the characters are interacting with the world. Like, that's what world building is. It's not necessarily the author describing things as they are apart from the characters. It's always filtered through the character's perception. And I love that about his writing, because you notice that when he's describing a setting, it's always through the lens of a character, even though it's third person. And you notice like how the representation of that landscape or that setting has a certain tone based on the psychology of the character. Yeah. So if it's somebody who's in the sea, it might be like, thrashing waves because the character themselves is tormented, that kind of thing. And I think that's pretty brilliant to me. I love it when an author does that. But I also agree with you, Angela, that even as a visual reader, I'm actually not always over the moon about a lot of description. There are exceptions to that. Like, I would say Cormac McCarthy is incredibly descriptive, and I'm living for it. But sometimes when it's in a different kind of book or story, I'm not really living for it. Like, I'd rather my mind infer and create its own visuals based on fewer words. But yeah, anyway, that's my tangent about that.
Well, I just learned recently that what's his face in First Law, the annoying character in the first book. I know they all are annoying. The rich guy. Oh, what's his name? Giselle. I just learned recently he's blonde. He has always been a brunette to me. But I have learned that I have been wrong for a very long time. And this happens to me every time there's an adaptation where it's faithful. And I'm like, oh, that is not.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
In Farseer, what's the character's name, Evie? I'm so embarrassed. I can't remember his name. Jade. When I was reading about Jade, I kept seeing a really handsome man. I think I had a crush on him.
I'm sorry.
And he's like described as pock-faced and really not very attractive. My mind didn't care. It just made him out.
He's also not very attractive on the inside. So.
I haven't read past Farseer, so I don't know. Maybe he's a horrible person. But
I don't think he's horrible. I have opinions about a lot of Farseer adults.
I do too. I have actually some unpopular opinions about certain characters in Farseer. But yeah, I thought it was weird because I'd have to remind myself, I'm like, oh wait, he's ugly. But my mind doesn't want to make him ugly somehow.
I will say, as someone who's never read First Law, I just envisioned all of the characters as emo Alan. Alan, if you're still here.
That's a good way to put it.
So,
no, all the characters in First Law, in my mind, they are very, like, it's weird because I know that Abercrombie's he's always applauded for writing very vivid characters and distinct characters, and he does. But for me personally, his characters feel slightly exaggerated, like almost like you're going into a Halloween place where people have like a lot of makeup, and I don't know, like they always seem exaggerated to me somehow.
Maybe that's why it works for me, and it's actually a book where I'm like, I have clear ideas of what these characters are like, so I like need that. I need the exaggeration because otherwise I'm like, oh, like I didn't know anything about what they look like. I don't know what color eyes they have, even if it said like 15 times.
Yep.
So that's funny. That's probably why I remember that.
Yeah, and thank you for putting the correct narrative terminology there. Internal focalization. AP did an amazing video about that, by the way, about focalization. I like dialogue-heavy books. Yeah, I do too. I love dialogue-heavy books. And Von Roycroft is an author, and he said, of all the authors I know, only one identifies as having aphantasia. It has to have its challenges. Well,
I mean, one of my favorite authors that identifies with aphantasia is Yoon-Ha Lee. And like when I described his books before knowing they had aphantasia, I'm like, I've never seen such a visual spectacle in space. Like it got me close to visualizing these like these crazy things that are going on. It was so imagination, like it was epic. I was just like,
That's 9 Fox Gambit.
Yeah,
I tried really hard, but like
I understand.
It doesn't sound like it would be for you, Brittany. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I haven't read it.
Very interesting, but I couldn't visualize a lot of, and in that, like I got stuck on that, and there's a lot going on. It's not
even easy to visualize if you're a visualizing reader because you don't have anything to ground you because it is so like out there. Like, how do you imagine an ice shield in space that's based on, like, it's just so out there.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I visualize things when I read, and I don't know if I'm visualizing things the way the author intended. I kind of consider half the time I'm probably not visualizing right, just like I gave with the example with Shade. But at the same time, sometimes I visualize things while I'm reading. And I did this actually with Assassin's Quest, actually, of all books, because I read it on ebook, and there are those illustrations that are interspersed throughout, just like the illustrated hardbacks. And I was so happy because I'd come across an image and I thought, oh, that's exactly how I was visualizing it. So I'd get so excited. And by the way, Read This Way says that the Broken Earth series has a quest vibe going on. So, but I didn't realize it until I made my boyfriend or best friend read it. And he was like, they're on the road a lot. So that's interesting because you said you didn't like quest journeys, but you love.
Well, you were talking about anti-buzzwords. So I guess I was answering more like if someone's pitching a book on BookTube, being like, I loved this book. It has X element. That's also for the Obelisk Gate, which is book 2. So at that point, I was reading book 2. Like, after reading the 5th season, that was happening. And what Jemison did with that quest is what I wish other people do. And it's like, yes, it's similar in Assassin's Quest. I actually don't dislike this part of Assassin's Quest. It's yes, the journey is daunting and harrowing and it's difficult and there's this dreary landscape and it's never ending. But there is also stuff happening with the people on the quest. They're talking, they're interacting, things are happening on an interpersonal level, where some quests, it's the montage scene of the book sometimes, and you don't really get those moments, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I get what you mean. I mean, yeah, I think I get what you mean with that.
Yeah.
And Roger says that we have to have a. I know, Roger, you were not super crazy about the trilogy. I actually, I think well, I know I loved I loved the trilogy. I'll just put it that way because I know Roger didn't. But at the same time, I feel like I have some unpopular opinions.
Roger keeps thinking I like it more than I do, and I'm like, no, I told you I like it, but I don't love it. Like, stop thinking
Yeah.
I'm not a Fitz defender.
Yeah. Well, I love.
I actively hurt Evie every time I talk about Fitz. I try not to.
I genuinely feel personally attacked whenever someone talks crap about Fitz. So I know it's unhealthy that I feel so personally connected to a fictional character, but we'll move past that.
I have unfortunately attached Fitz to my father, and therefore he gets all the negative energy I can't spend on my own father. So I am really sorry.
I think well, I don't mean to make this a big, huge farce of your discussion. I know Brittany hasn't read it, and you've had your time with Hob. That's completely fine.
That's fair.
Yeah, yeah.
I will say, in response to Matt's comment, I don't think I've ever noticed someone's eye color in real life. I think, honestly, at least for me, that has something to do with it. Like, I can't look people in the eye, so I don't notice things like physical attributes about people. Really? Eye color, hair color, whatever. Like, if I didn't watch guys' videos all the time, I'd be like, I don't know what you look like. So
have you never met someone with such piercing blue eyes that you're like, you look like a White Walker? Because I've said that to someone. I know this person, they are a close friend, but it was like when I first met them, like, your eyes, they're so piercingly blue.
Oh, is this the comment? Or Brian Lee Durfee is here?
Oh, no, it was Matt's comment.
Okay. I don't know why authors mention eye color at all. I wish I'd never done it for every character. I can't keep it straight from book to book. Oh, yeah.
I honestly think that as a rule of thumb, you should only mention things if they are important, and you can define what's important, but I feel like most of the time it's not. Like,
well, I mean, that's an interesting point that Brian Lee Durfee makes too, because I know when I did that video, do you visualize what you read? A lot of people in the comment section said, I can visualize settings, but I can't visualize characters in detail. And I think that's totally fair, because if you read the way that a lot of authors write, I mean, with little exceptions here and there, like Shade having a pocked face or whatever, most authors don't give you a lot of visual description of characters. Most of them don't. Somebody was even saying that an Erudite Adventure, I think Tim from that channel, he was telling me that he read The Lord of the Rings before seeing the movies. I think he said that. And he said that he had a very intense, like vivid description in his mind of what Treebeard looked like. And then he watched the movie and it was totally different than what he had pictured in his mind. But when he went back and reread Lord of the Rings, he realized Tolkien never really described it. He just created that. So I think the reason, and I think one of the reasons that a lot of authors don't give you a lot of detailed description on the character's face is because a lot of times we're made to look at the story through the character. And what's the thing that's always changing in a book, usually a fantasy book? It's usually the setting. It's very rarely the character's visual description. But I guess it just depends on the story. But.
Yeah, I think it's a fine line of, seeing a world from a character's perspective and having a reader see a character as a self-insert for the author or the reader or whatever. Stephanie Meyer, sorry.
But true. I mean, I've self-inserted hard, hence the Team Jacobness of my teenage years. She made mistakes. Bella made mistakes.
True. Stephanie Meyer made mistakes.
Wait, what? Were you a Team Jacob person? Never.
Okay, first of all, from just a pure, like, I would live in Washington State perspective, why would I ever want my boyfriend to be that cold? Like, no.
I used to drive home at night hoping I would run into a vampire driving through the woods. I'm like, tonight might be the night. Like, maybe I'll meet the vampire tonight. Like, just me driving home and my little Focus. Like, maybe I'm out here all alone.
That's fun.
Yeah. But I mean, to your point, Evie, I think also sometimes eye color is used as a lazy, this person is special cue, because it's, we connect it to our genetic rules. Like, you already know it's a chosen one if they have hazel or green eyes. Done.
Oh,
Like,
I would think it would be blue. Since
it's
that's
usually the green because the Harry Potter has green eyes. You look and now you won't unsee it. If they have green eyes, they are special.
I think there's only one book I read, and I cannot tell you what it was right now, but like whoever had the powers had brown eyes, and it was like literally only one
wow.
time. But I also think too, I don't know if it's like in real life nobody cares what color eyes and hair their friends have, like, so I wonder if it's just like a detail we just kind of skim over, and it's like not important to us in the grand scheme of everything else that's happening in the book, so we just kind of, it passively enters and exits our brain kind of. I'm wondering if that like plays a role in it.
Yeah, I think also a lot of rare genetic traits show up, like red hair. How many red hair protagonists have we ever had? And it's like a rare genetic trait, and we always get that. Like, I can think of it for male and female characters in adult and YA. Like, we just, it's like our kind of shorthand of saying this is person's extra special.
Couple of middle
Hmm.
series.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
True. That's true. I have not noticed that before. I'm gonna have to start paying attention to those
I
details.
didn't used to notice it because, again, everyone's brunette when I read them, but then I see fan art or I see people complaining about, oh, another YA book with XYZ, and then I notice on Twitter threads, I'm like, oh, okay.
No, literally, when I had red hair, I was like, I can be any like fantasy superstar now. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I paid attention to it more because my hair was finally red, and I'm like, all the cool girls have red hair in the book. I was like, I'll be Avienda now. Like, this is fine.
Oh, Alan just showed a cool fact, which is a depressing fact, but yeah.
In real life, statistics show that blue-eyed people are trusted faster and seen as more attractive in first impressions. I think I've seen something about this before, that different eye colors or give you different impressions of people. Yeah, you know, I mean, I lived in the Southwest, and we'd have border checks sometimes, when you go between cities. And sadly, like, I know my brother, who's darker skinned than I am, he would get pulled over more. And my friend who had blue eyes, she said, I hate doing this, but I have to admit, whenever they pull me over, you better believe I pull down my sunglasses. And
Yeah.
people do have a different perception of eye color. It's really sad.
Yeah. Which, joke's on them, my eye color does come from Venezuela, not from my European roots.
What color are your eyes? I can't even
They're
see
like,
them.
you can't see them in videos. It's like hazel green, which
Ah,
both my parents have brown eyes. So it's like a weird twist of something that it came out that way.
that is interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's always it's always much more less clear than people realize. Like, for example, my dad, he grew up in Mexico, but he was kind of blonde when he was a kid. So, and I
Same
have
with my
cousins.
dad. All my light hair color came from when my dad was blonde in Venezuela. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have cousins who are blonde and blue-eyed and Hispanic.
Well, I think that's all. I mean, we won't go down this tangent, but that's like a whole thing where people just assume all Latinx people are the same shade of brown with the dark hair. And I'm like, it actually has its own colorism problem and its own, like, it has so many races within it. Like,
Yeah,
it's,
it's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Not to go down a rabbit hole with that, but I do notice it in books too. Like, a lot of times in fantasy books, it's like people live in the South, they're going to be dark skinned, and they're going to be, and I wonder about that too. I'm like, is that? I don't know. I get curious about that kind of thing. Not that I'm saying they're wrong. I just, it makes me curious.
it generalizes a lot of things. And
It generalizes. Yes, thank
the
you. Gigi.
CI
That's a good
depressors. Sorry.
So what about things you're loving in books right now? What are things that you are really enjoying right now in books? Anybody can answer this.
I mean, other than just
You're living your best life right now.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just living in Robin Hobb's world, and I will do whatever she wants. But no, it's but before BookTube, I used to read a lot of the same things, a lot of my favorite books, and especially in the last couple of years, particularly this past year, for the longest time, for almost 20 years now, Persuasion has always been my most favorite book of all time. And then I read Bear and the Nightingale, which that was last year. And then I read Assassin's Apprentice. Yes, thank you, Angela. And then I read what I thought was going to be my favorite was The Vanished Birds, but The Spear Cuts Through Water has taken that that manual.
Really? Oh, wow.
I
And it's-
disagree, but only on like a little
Yeah,
technical.
it's like they're like neck and neck, but I'm like, I gotta give it to Spear Cuts Through Water. It's
Alan's gonna be mad if you don't say Augustus at any point.
also Augustus is my favorite of the John Williams, and it is incredible.
I have an unpopular opinion, Alan. For me, it's Stoner.
As if you guys both don't love him though.
It's true.
But I'm a huge John Williams fan now. Brittany gifted me Stoner, so thank you, Brittany. You gifted me my favorite book of the year, so I love it.
It's not The Vanished Birds. I'm so hurt and offended.
Oh, and and Evie gifted me the Vanished Birds, but I love the Vanished Birds too. It was wonderful.
It's a tier.
Is
It's not a number.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool though. I love that you're loving Hobbes so much because I've only read Farseer so far, and it just makes me all the more excited to continue that journey. Yeah, so and it sounds like, and it's interesting because I feel like it's hard to pinpoint what my own taste is, but I've noticed that a lot of books that Evie likes, Evie tends to be my test of like, okay, I think I'm gonna like a book if Evie likes it. So
I'll be your guinea pig. So
yeah.
But you're willing to have more fun than Evie, so you get to have a wider range of books.
I don't know about that. I don't read enough classical literature too. That's the problem. Oh, now we're going to blame Jimmy. That's funny because Jimmy did say something like, Joanna, it better be Stoner, not Augustus. He did say something like that. But
which is ironic because he says that The Vanished Birds, well, he said it's his favorite of the Patreon picks, but still,
oh,
he says
yeah,
it's
that's
his
true.
favorite. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's just so people have some background though. John Williams is an author who's not fantasy at all. He's more, I guess, literary fiction. I don't really know what genre to put him in, but he wrote both the book Augustus, which is a historical fiction on the great emperor Augustus, which is an epistolary book, and he wrote Stoner, which is about an English college professor, and he was a very ordinary man. But man, John Williams, his prose is just phenomenal. And I read Stoner this year because of Jimmy. I knew about the book beforehand, but after hearing Jimmy talk about it, I thought, okay, prioritizing that, it's free on Audible. And then I picked up Augustus because of Alan, and I also loved it so, so much. Both very different books, same author, not fantasy, but both recommended to me from two wonderful fantasy booktubers. So
And I will add that Butcher's Crossing, also by John Williams. It's like his prose is consistent throughout all three of those books. But Butcher's Crossing is a Western, but it's like simultaneously it just breaks all the rules of Western while still paying homage to it. It's just really good.
And Stoner is not about a stoner.
Yeah.
It's about a man named William Stoner. Yeah.
And Western is another anti-buzzword.
What is?
Westerns are also anti-buzzwords for me.
They're not for me. Not for me now.
It's Butcher's Crossing has been my first and only Western so far, so I have a feeling I will have a bad time.
I've read
if
Pulpy
it's
Western,
not John Williams.
And I read Lonesome Dove, which is a more serious, like, subversion of West. I just don't like the Southwest desert setting.
Oh, that's where I'm from.
I know. I'm sorry. I know.
That's why I love it.
If it helps, I also don't really like historical fiction set in America in the 1800s in general. Like, it's just a depressing time. We don't do anything good.
No, that's helpful. I can understand that. And I know, Brittany, I think you don't like Westerns either.
Right? I don't have a lot of experience reading them, but like the take of a Western that I feel Joe Abercrombie did was enough to make me be like, I don't want to read anything else like this. So I haven't given it a fair shot, but I don't think I'll enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I that's what I was going to say is that if you don't think that Joe Abercrombie did a Western right, that's probably saying it all you need to know.
Because I love Joe Abercrombie. So.
Yes, that's what I mean. Because I know how much you love Joe Abercrombie. I did actually love Red Country. And after like what little I've read of Blood Meridian, I could see the influence that Blood Meridian had on Red Country. Like places in mud, built out of mud, like everything. It's just amazing. Yeah. But yeah, it's not for everyone. I can understand why it's not for everyone too. I could totally get it's a vibe. It's a vibe.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back up here really quickly before going on with this question. Yes, sometimes the darker skinned people can be from the north. See, I want to see that in books sometimes in a fantasy book, but
yeah.
When you read, when you read, do you consciously or unconsciously look to be represented in books, or do you care more about other elements?
I will say that I to kind of sidestep that question, since being on BookTube, I'm more conscious of what is being portrayed on the page and like the representation of the wider world in my literature. So I'm more aware of like who's writing it, what type of character they are, if they're pro-colonial themes going on, or anti-colonial or what have you. I'm very much aware of that. I don't consciously go towards one or the other, but I'm aware of it when I read it in literature, and can kind of have that conversation with the text of like, I don't like this, or oh, actually this take on this theme is really good.
I think I like almost interpret the question a little bit differently, maybe, because so if I'm like looking to be represented in books, or do I care more about other elements? And I don't know if you meant like how represented, I suppose, like my features, or like where I'm from, do you know what I mean? Or because more so like I'm thinking like emotionally, or things, like personality wise, like that. And like I love reading about other people's experiences and learning from that, but then like there's the part of me that always is going to like connect with something, like whatever I can pull from someone else's experience that we connect to, because I think that's like the human part that like connects all of us. Like just reading Dear Thurin this past month, which is like one of my top probably 5 books of the year. I loved it so much, and that book was not written for me in any way, shape, or form, and it was a wonderful book to read. But what was so powerful about it was like the way that you can connect to what another person went through, even when they have so many differences from you. So like you can learn.
Yeah.
And not necessarily, does that make sense? Because I feel like I interpret it a little bit differently.
Yeah, there's you realize the kind of universality, that's even a word, it is now, of literature, so and reading. So I will say again, I'm just consumed by Robin Hobb. Cloven Hooves, like 2 chapters into it, I'm like, damn, this might be one of my favorite books of all time, and not just because the character's name is Evelyn. Like I felt so connected to every single aspect of that book so quickly.
Wow.
I guess for me, I'm trying to think about this. So I always do notice if I have a connection or a representation alignment with the character, but it's rarely why I pick it up. And it's not usually like, it's an added bonus. There are very few books that I pick up where I'm like, I'm picking it up because it has this thing that I can connect to that I don't normally get to connect to. And part of that is there aren't that many books that represent my life experience, or the ones that might, I don't want to read that part of my life experience, and I would like to pass, if that makes sense. Like there are books that I've been forced to read for my literary book club, and I'm like, I didn't need to see this harmful parent-child relationship. No. Did not need that. Like those sort of things. But it is always like a pleasant surprise when I feel that connection with the character. But I mean, as a fantasy sci-fi reader, yeah, I'm kind of there for people asking questions and then seeing how the author chooses to frame the question and then either answer it or, I'm sorry, my cat just came in here.
That's all right.
Screaming.
He does that in your videos all the time. I love it.
I heard the cat and I knew it would be yours, Angela.
Yeah.
Wu Tao. Oh my God. Anyway. So like when I'm picking up a fantasy and sci-fi book, usually I don't know why I do this, because I do think speculative is becoming such a broad thing for me now that separating it's harder. But sci-fi, 2 of my favorite sci-fis recently have been like more anthropology. in the book, like looking at cultural effects based off different situations or studying different cultures in these sci-fi scenarios. And I've been loving that. But in fantasy, I'm like, okay, I want you to create a new world and a new world order and show me things. Like, I'm getting really burnt out on feudalism in fantasy. Like, there are other government systems. Let's have some fun. Let's do other things.
Oh, that's a thought. I never thought about it.
There are literally so many parts of the world that didn't do feudalism first, and they were also bad or good for different reasons. Like, there are so many ways we could go, but we get stuck in feudalism because it's familiar and it's easy to convince the reader to rebel against feudalism. Therefore, you suddenly have a rebellion fantasy, and off we go.
Yeah. Anita said here, I get connected based on similar experience rather than the same looks or same background. Yeah. That's interesting. I think the same thing. I mean, I think that speaks to what Evie was saying about the universality of the experience. But at the same time, I don't know, like every time I hear those tags with questions of name a fantasy character that you're exactly like, and I even made a tag which has a question like that, but I don't feel like I see myself in any, I can't think of a character that says Joanna. I don't know. Somebody tell me if they think of a character that reminds you of me.
It happens so rarely. And this is why probably I like Brandon Sanderson more than I should, because some of the few characters I know that I think of as like me are his female characters. And I know his female characters aren't for everyone. We're not a monolith as like a gender or anything like that. But like Steris, I read Steris and I'm like, oh, am I on the spectrum and I never knew it? Oh, here I am. Like, I just felt so seen in how she responded to the world.
Steris? I didn't think about that, about Steris being on the spectrum. That's interesting.
She is meant to be autistically coded.
Oh, she is. Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, I didn't know that either, but I like was connecting so hard with her and then later heard about that. And I was just like, oh, my anxiety and we are the same.
Yeah.
As a self-sabotaging female who's been through a lot of trauma and has a bad attitude problem, like I kind of relate to too many female protagonists. That's why I have one word tattooed on my body. So that's just,
again, to bring it back to Robin Hobb.
We're gonna like make you pay $1 every time you say Robin Hobb. You need to donate it to a charity.
You know, it's fine. But no, it's genuinely why I feel. Again, I realize it's irrational for me to get so worked up and offended and hurt when people negatively criticize Fitz, or at least
I know you see a lot of yourself in Fitz. You are a better person than Fitz. I need you to think better of yourself.
I was gonna
that's how Fitz thinks of himself.
No, Fitz is bad. Fitz is worse than he thinks himself. That's the difference.
I'm further along in the series than you are, Angela.
Okay, so I've only read Farseer, and I don't know that I relate to Fitz as much in the third book, or maybe even as much in the second book, but I actually did think after reading Assassin's Apprentice, like, this is me. That's
which
weird.
Is probably why we're great at like liking the same books.
Yeah, I'm like, that's weird. That's a weird parallel. It's a weird connection we have, which I didn't want to. I didn't want to relate to Fitz, but I feel like, there are certain things about his storyline. I don't feel like, I don't know if I want to get too personal, but I feel like there are certain things about his storyline that I feel like I could relate to.
I will say Fitz makes complete sense. I still don't like the man, but he makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he makes sense.
All right, we somehow got back to Fitz. Bring us back, Joanna. Give us.
We keep coming back to Farseer again.
I will say I'm not entirely sure what Alan is referring to about ratting both of them out to the cops. Enjoy prison thieves. Soup salad Alan.
Something about Kaz? Is that what I'm lost?
We're talking about Leanna's favorite characters and locking them up or something.
Okay. Talking about Shadow and Bone. Kaz.
Yeah. Not Shadow and Bone. Isn't Kaz in the Six of Crows?
And like Lamora.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't read Six of Crows. I just know about Kaz.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't read that.
I'm not going to. I'm going to watch the show until Netflix cancels it. That's the plan.
I did get excited though, because I did read. Yeah, I mean, it sometimes happens. Like there was one book I read earlier this year, which is it's a weird book. It's called An Inventory of Losses by Judith Shalonsky. I'm going to be talking about it in a few videos and towards the end of the year. I actually read it at the very beginning of the year, but I'm kind of obsessed with it now. But in this book, there's a whole chapter where this author talks about falling out of a second-story window when she was a very little girl and the thoughts that were going through her head when she fell. And the weird thing is, I fell from a second-story window when I was about the same age that she was, and we were born the same year.
That's
And
weird.
she lived in Germany, I lived in the US, but I had the same thoughts like she describes, and it was the creepiest experience. So that was actually kind of a nonfiction chapter in a weird, like genre-defying book. But yeah, that was probably my weirdest experience of relating to a character.
Wild.
Hope you guys are enjoying my cat cam.
I am.
I think he's enjoying.
My
Is
cats
it?
are locked out of this room.
So what about other things you all are enjoying in books right now?
I've been enjoying some nonfiction. I think that's like a lot of what I've been reading lately. I had to put down the political fantasy because that just was taking up too much room. But yeah, I think like if I'm ever having a hard time focusing on something, listening to nonfiction, and the fantasy that stuck with me the most recently has still been Jade Legacy. Like, so I've been loving like anything family related, and obviously I love that because I loved the first two. But I think like the family aspect, generational aspect, and everything. And then I'm not big on like self-help books typically or specifically, but like I think things that change the way you view the world or change your perspective on things that are nonfiction right now, I've been loving. So like a couple memoirs lately I've loved, like Dear Thurin and The Opposite of Butterfly Hunting. And I think I read another one recently. I can't remember though.
Yeah, I think I heard you talk about the butterfly hunting one. It sounded interesting.
Yeah, well, so it's oh my gosh, what's her name? Ivana Lynch. So she's who plays Luna Lovegood. And so it's her memoir about, the majority of it is entirely her eating disorder experience. So it's like super raw, and it's like the most it's my life. It's like the most I've ever identified with somebody ever. But then also there's a lot of interesting facts about like how she got the role and like her love for Harry Potter well before she ever possibly thought she could get the role and stuff. So it's interesting.
Okay, you've totally sold me. I want to read this book. Or listen
It's
to
like
it.
I made my sister read it and my mom read it, and they're both like cried through the whole thing. But it was like what kept me going day to day when I read it.
Nice.
Wow. I'm going to check that out. That sounds awesome.
And the audiobook is narrated by her, so
Yeah,
recommend that.
I love that. I haven't listened to a lot of memoirs in a while, but I do enjoy them now and then, especially if they're narrated by the author.
I think Joanna, I think I mentioned this, I can't remember, but I think you'll love Dear Thurin by Akwaeke Emezi too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
listened to that through audiobook, and it was like I would recommend it to everyone, honestly.
Yeah, tell me about it. What is it about? I mean, it's
I don't want to
your memoir, right?
Yeah, let me grab it real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, a Black spirit memoir. So it's just about their experience from being younger, everything that they had to go through, like whether it's moving locations, dealing with family members, dealing with figuring out their identity and having people question it. Also, a lot of the religious aspects and challenges that they've had to go through. So it was very interesting to learn about a lot of the things that I really had no idea about. A lot about love and relationships and suicide and just a lot of really hard things. But the writing, I mean, their writing is like some of my favorite ever. And so I'd be listening and have to like stop and go back and listen again and again, because it would seriously like, it would make me stop in my tracks and like take my breath away. So it's just so well written. And I don't know, I just think it's a really important book for a lot of people to listen to. But at the same time, I have a friend, I don't want to say her name to like call her out, but she wrote the best Goodreads review for it, because she was like, this book was not written for me. This is not for me to relate to. This is somebody else's story for other people. But the way that they wrote it just was like, I don't know, unlike anything else. And you can still relate to certain parts, even if they have nothing to do with you,
Yeah.
because of how strong the writing is.
I love that, though. I love that. I think that relates back to Alicia's question. And I feel that way with the book that we buddy read together earlier this year, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Jeffers, because that was definitely not a story that I could personally relate to. It was about a person of color, a Black woman, growing up in the South and interacting with her Black communities and the traumas she's gone through and how her ancestral past affected who she is in the present. So it's a real deep exploration of identity and trauma. And I felt like I loved the story so much. It was so beautifully written. But for me, it was very special because it takes place a lot in Georgia. And although I currently live in Georgia, I'm not originally from Georgia. And so reading from Ailey Garfield's perspective in that book, it felt like it helped me get a bird's eye view or get some kind of fly on the wall perspective of people I probably pass by here all the time and don't know. So I just appreciated that so much. I felt like it was just an incredible experience for me personally.
Yeah, and I feel like with this book too, there's so much that I still don't even understand with their identity exactly, and the religious aspect of like being a god or ancestors. But the perspective that they brought that I can use that like shed light on my way of living was just in a way that things that I never thought of before, I suppose. So it was just really interesting to learn that.
That's cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. What about you two, Evie and Angela? Any things you would add to things you're loving in books right now?
Something that piggybacks off of what Brittany was talking about, and it kind of also goes back to Alicia's comment of like when representation is like the reason you pick it. So I picked up an Isabel Allende for the first time because she's one of the South American great authors, and I've been determined that I will love her. And so far I'm loving her, so that's exciting. And she's my aunt's favorite author, and my aunt and I like never talk about books. So, you know, when you have someone in your life, you know, and I read that, and I also read It Would Be Night in Caracas this year, which are two South American, not fantasy books. One's contemporary and one's historical. And it really showed me my knowledge gaps. I wouldn't say it filled them in completely, but like the amount that I didn't know about the 20th century in Chile in terms of the different government regimes, how economics and the patriarchy works there and everything like that. And then through the lens of this refugee exile family and how they go through was just really eye-opening. And It Would Be Night in Caracas actually showed me a lot of what I already knew about contemporary Venezuela, but also gave me like a view into the 80s in Venezuela that I've never had a lot of context for. Because even though I have these like primary people in my life who I can be like, tell me about Venezuela, they don't, I mean, you talk to people when they're from places, they don't always like to talk about where they're from or things like that. You know, it's like, I could ask Brittany, hey, how's Michigan? And I don't know if she really wants to talk about it. Like, you know, like.
Well, there's also the added aspect of like, that's one person's experience and perspective of a time or a place. So,
right.
Yeah. But like, so I read Long Petal of the Sea. So it's not even one of her best works per se. And it's not magical realism. It's just a straight generational historical fiction. It's told really beautifully in like 300 pages. And I really loved it. And I loved it because it was told in a way that I wasn't expecting to like the writing style. But I could, like Evie saw in real time me being like, I don't know if I want to read this right now. It's not fun. But like I need to read it for book club. And we went from I was only going to read 30 pages to I spent the rest of that evening reading that book. And I kept doing that. So
and that's what you're looking for right now. You're looking for an experience like that right now.
But I don't know how to find that. I don't know how to like make sure that happens.
I know. You've been trying to
organically happen. Like
it's impossible to predict.
Yeah. No, so but another thing that is less the I always want to keep reading it that I've been loving lately, and it keeps happening, and I got my book club to pick a book that's similar to this in terms of narrative structure, so I'm excited. And it's not short stories, although I love short stories, but it is like episodic books with longer chapters where each chapter is a contained thought in a meta arc, if that makes sense. So Symbiosis was generation jumping sci-fi, and so each chapter was a character perspective and looking at this moment in the history of this community. That was each chapter, and I really loved that and seeing where it went. And then I read Strange Beasts of China for Tammy Reed's Tries to Read's channel, and each of those was a look at a strange beast and how it connected to the main character. So that like TV show episodic nature in a book, I've been very much vibing with lately. And we're going to read The Cabinet for my local book club, which is a Korean translated work that I think is just supposed to be weird fiction. I have no idea what it's going to be.
I almost bought that.
I was about to say, it felt like a Brittany book when I picked it up, but I didn't.
Yeah, I haven't read it, but I want to.
So like, but like that right now, that narrative framework is very attractive to my brain when it only has the energy to maybe pick up a book for 40 minutes or an hour a day or something. But it's also been really fulfilling. I am a short story reader, so I am predisposed to that type of thing.
Yeah. I'm not a short story reader. I really wish I was, because I need to get to Sharp Ends by Joe Abercrombie, or I think I do. I don't know. Brittany, have you read Sharp Ends?
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Yeah.
Okay.
I would also say that whether you like or dislike Sharp Ends is not, they are short stories because they are short. But that's not the type of short stories that Evie and I read. Like they're meant to fill in blanks in like a narrative, right? That's what those stories are. When I read a short story, it's beginning, middle, end, or maybe lack of end. It's in those 10 to 20 pages. There's no context required.
Yeah.
Really different.
Kim Liu or Ted Chiang or Carmen Marie Machado.
That's the trifecta. Trinity. That's the holy trinity, honestly.
Yeah. I'm thinking about reading this soon.
I do love that anthology. It's not my favorite anthology, but it's up there.
Yeah. Cool. I'm going to catch up with the chat really quickly. I think I missed some comments about Alan.
There was a lot of Florida discussion of health insurance and wheelchairs.
Oh no, poor Alan. Poor Alan. If anybody doesn't know, Alan was in an accident. I think everybody probably knows about the details of that. And
I mean, hopefully Alan doesn't, kick me out of the Discord server for saying this, but he gets to go home on Friday, so that's exciting.
That is exciting. Man, there's a lot of discussion about Florida going on. I'm sorry, I've not been keeping up.
Oh, my last short story plug is they actually usually have lots of podcasts that are related to short stories through magazines and stuff. And it's a great way to consume it because it's literally the length of a podcast to consume that short story. And you can it feels, I think, more fulfilling to people who are used to the podcast length amount of time to be in a story. To do that.
Also, LeVar Burton reads a bunch of short stories on his podcast. So,
yeah, that's pretty cool, by the way, Philip, that you had a farmer student who was a child actor. I've never had that experience.
I will say that other than Robin Hobb and Simon Jimenez, this year has been the year of Sarah Tolmie. And if you're still in the chat, Matt is my go-to buddy reader for Sarah Tolmie. I started with All the Horses of Iceland and have just been going through her back catalog, and she's one of the most consistent authors that I've come across in quite some time.
Yeah, I feel like Joanna would really like her.
Yeah.
Still feeling out the taste, but I feel like she would really like her.
Yeah, I honestly was really nervous to read The Stone Boatman because it's a full-length novel compared to novellas that I've read from Tolmie up to that point. And I mean, Matt, I'm putting words in your mouth, but we both really enjoyed it, and we were pleasantly surprised to find that it is kind of episodic, where you have these parts that are kind of self-contained, but they are all have this wider plot. So it actually, Angela, you might like it.
I might. Anthologies are hard, by the way. Collections are way easier for me to read than anthologies because, and I had to teach myself, only read at most 2 short stories from an anthology a day. Don't try and dip in and out of that many writing styles and world building or whatever. It's no. Also, to piggyback, she asked if I'd read Reclaim the Stars. I tried. I DNF'd it after the sci-fi stories. That's the classic thing where they took a lot of long-form authors, in particular a lot of young adult authors specifically, and told them to write short stories. And again, it's not the same. You can't just take a long story and make it shorter and have a satisfying short story. That's not how that craft works. It's different.
Yeah.
And you can't always take a short story author and make them write novels. Like, it doesn't, like what Evie was talking about. She was nervous about the novel from a novella author. Like, it just.
I know that Pete Jelly Clark, if I'm saying that name right, I know that the author is known for their short stories or novellas more so than their regular sized novels. And I do have The Black God's Drum. That's the one.
That one's good. That one's very good.
I know. I need to get to it. And it's been on my shelf forever. Charmaine kindly gifted that to me, and I still haven't gotten to it.
The audiobook's also good for that one if you like audiobook.
Yeah, I do sometimes.
I listened to it on a plane ride. So
I've been really struggling with audiobooks the last couple of months for some reason. But yeah, that one. And but yeah, in general, I really do. I don't know why I don't gravitate as much to short stories. I read a couple of Conan stories this year, and those were really fun, actually. For some reason, it's just not something. I don't know why, because it seems like such an easy thing, and everybody recommends short stories.
Well, Evie and I will hand pick a short story collection for you to buddy read with us, because that's also the way to do short stories.
Yeah. And I haven't read Hyperion, and I know Hyperion is one of Brittany's favorite books of all time.
But you've never read it?
I haven't read it.
It's one of my favorites too, Joanna. So no pressure.
Yeah, it's still on my shelf, and I still haven't read it.
I'm a little scared.
But the one reason I haven't read it, this is actually one of the reasons, because I keep putting it up, and it's just not found a place in my TBR yet. But one of the main reasons I haven't gotten to it is because a lot of people I've talked to have said, if you read Hyperion, be ready to read the second one immediately after.
No. That wasn't
you don't have
opinions on this. There are varying opinions on this. Yeah.
It depends on who you are as a reader specifically. It's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, some people die on the hill of you don't need any other books, which I think is a little extreme of a take, but that is a hill people die on.
Yeah.
So it sets up stuff. Go ahead, Brittany, though.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think people don't necessarily enjoy, like, if you're reading it for an outcome, you're going to want the second book immediately. But if you're reading it to find out and you're reading it for the journey, you're going to be satisfied with the book. And then if you like the book and you're curious, then you're going to want to read the second one. It's just like naturally going to happen. But by no means do you have to like have that and be the next thing that you read. I think I'm sure I read stuff in between. I don't know. But then once I got to like Endymion and the Rise of Endymion, I like books 3 and 4 better than books 1 and 2. Actually, I love books 3 and 4 so much. And those I was like, I just have to keep reading until I know what's going to happen, because everything feels like the stakes are
and they were so tonally different. And yeah, one was way more marathonable. Like I couldn't put it down for some reason. I was so invested in this, I don't know, love story is the best way I can describe it, but it's not like a romance. It's just like this larger than life galactic thing.
It's like,
it was so Star Wars, really.
It's just like, I wouldn't put it off if you're like, well, I don't have time to read Hyperion, and like if you can't read them back to back, I think you're fine. Like you're not going to forget what happens in book 1 by the time you get to book 2.
Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah, because I know like with Dune, I put off Dune Messiah forever because I thought, I don't know, that's a whole other story. But yeah, I think that hearing that is very assuring, because actually that is one of the reasons I haven't gotten to more sci-fi. There's a ton of sci-fi I want to read. And I keep on telling myself, you need to read God Emperor of Dune, which is the 4th book in the Dune Chronicles. I haven't gotten to that yet. And so I keep telling myself, you need to finish that before you get to other sci-fi. But then I cheated and I read The Vanished Birds. So, oh well.
Any of you ever read the Tales of the Dying Earth? Can you let me know? Because I need somebody to read that with. I don't think you will, Angela, because it's like classic, old sci-fi. It's what inspired Hyperion partially, I read.
This cover is not inspiring me, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm so behind on the chat. Let's see what people are saying in the chat. I've heard some. Let's see.
1950. Oof.
Yeah.
That's an
Yeah,
ass.
I don't think it's gonna be.
Yeah. Oh, and I was gonna say to Jimmy, I do have Old Man and the Sea, and I've been meaning to get to that forever. That's another one that's been on my shelf for ages, and I still haven't gotten to it. Let's see. I liked Maria Gainza's Optic Nerve,
Oh,
Argentinian art critic. Interesting. Sharp Ends was mid. That's sad.
Does anyone need a copy of Sharp Ends hardback? I still own one. It still
Really?
exists. Yeah.
Sure.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Message me your address. I will. Happy
Oh,
Christmas.
really? Well, thank you. Good
No,
thing. And by
It's
the
been
way,
on my shelf for so many moves because it's nice and I want to get rid of it. But truly, I don't own any other first law books. I don't know why I have this book.
so wait, do you like First Law at all, or
No, I do. Oh, so I read First Law back in college with my friends because we all did Dungeons and Dragons together and we all read fantasy. And I was like, well, let's have a fantasy book club. I'll pick a series. And I rightfully picked the First Law. They all loved it. And I was like, this is fine, I guess. And I hated West, and everyone loves West. I'm like, no, West is the worst. I hate him. And my friends always now, even to this day in our group chat that gets resurrected every couple months, will go, West is the best or something like that. Like, they just come for me. And I read it, and then silly me, thought it was a trilogy because it was when I finished it. And then like 4 years later or 3 years later, I see Sharp Ends and I'm like, oh, I should get that. Or I put it on my wish list for Christmas and it shows up. And then I realize it said it was like 6.5 or something. And I'm like, what are the other books? And I'm like, oh, there's these standalones I haven't read. But I haven't read the first trilogy in forever. And then this is where the BookTube influence happens. Everyone loves First Law that I think is very fine. And I'm like, did I miss something? Was it me? Am I the problem? And I tried again, and it's still fine.
That happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't reread books a ton. I must be kind of reliable with my tastes because I don't know. I definitely find that I notice different things when I reread a book, but I can't think of a book I reread that I loved more upon reread.
Oh,
I don't think it's happened to me yet. And I can't think of a book that I liked less upon reread either, but I haven't reread a ton. So maybe I need to test this theory more.
You know, books I like less upon reread.
So
Starlight.
Yes. Oh yes, I remember that.
I won't go there.
That could be a potential thing.
So
for me.
I'm rereading in the midst of rereading Wuthering Heights for the first time since I first and last read it. Well, since I last read it 20 years ago in college, and I have it tattooed on my body. Thank God I'm not regretting it, but I have such a different perspective in my mind of like, I forgot how freaking violent this book is. Like, holy crap. Mind you, I did not like this book, and I've never loved Wuthering Heights because of the romance. It's not a romance, okay? They're depraved people, but I forgot how violent it is. And I'm like, oh my God. Thank God, I don't regret this, but it would have been a bad time if I was like, oh no, I need to make an appointment to get this removed.
So like, I'm like such a rereader. Like before BookTube, I reread like the same 20 things over and over again. And so I'm a weird thing. I don't like spoilers at all. I'm really spoiler sensitive. As I watch people on BookTube, I get used to who does too much for my taste and stuff like that, and learn when to scrub through a book that I want to read, as we all learn how to maneuver that whole mess. But then I love rereading where everything that's going to happen. And like, I have more fun when I know what's going to happen. So why do I care about spoilers? Like, I don't know why I am the way I am.
That's interesting. I know that there's some talk with, I think a Critical Dragon maybe did a video because everybody keeps talking about it, where he said that there was some kind of study in which they found that people enjoyed books more when they were spoiled. I don't know.
Because like sometimes I think if you're reading a book, for some books, some of the dislike comes from not knowing why you are where you are in the book. Like, it's like, why is the author doing this thing that I don't currently care about? But when you have the whole picture and on reread, you'd be like, oh, I know why I'm in this scene, or I know when this scene will end. It's like your first time hiking a trail that was really difficult is like a pain. But if you do that over and over again, you kind of know when it's over. I don't know.
That makes sense. I can definitely see that being the case for certain books.
Well, the known is more comfortable than the unknown. I mean, no matter what it is. So, I mean, like, I was sad the other night. I watched episode 1 of Star Wars again for the 5 millionth time. Like, instant happiness. Okay, this is comfortable. I know
Episode 3 is my go-to.
It's
See, I'm still an episode 2 apologist. Brittany and I bond over episode 2 like all the time. Also, the prequel movies are such good young adult movies, and no one believes that, but like they're great. They are peak.
Listen, I get into arguments with my husband all the time. The original trilogy was made for kids, okay?
Truly.
And he craps on the sequel trilogy like, oh, they just made it for kids.
Are you talking about the trilogy that was done in the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah,
that's my favorite.
Yeah,
but I haven't watched any of the other stuff. I haven't watched very much Star Wars after that, so I'm kind of out of the conversation.
I crap on him all the time. I'm like, you watched episode 2 live in theater when you were 5 years old. It was made for kids.
I have an unhealthy relationship with Anakin Skywalker in my head, and it's fine.
I had an argument with my dad because my nephew was talking about why I liked Darth Vader. My dad was like, "Why do you like Darth Vader?" And I was like, Anakin. Okay, that's all I could say. Like, okay. Aww. Leave it alone.
So I would argue that because George Lucas knew where he was going from start to finish, the prequel series is much better because he knew where he was going, as opposed to the original. He was just flying by the seat of his
Truly, he did not know Luke and Leia were related in that first movie. No, he didn't know that yet. He didn't know.
Yeah, anyone in the chat that disagrees with me, at me, I will fight you.
I didn't know that. Luke's father did die in battle. He was not Darth Vader. No, we're giving the man too much credit.
I also think that I love episode 3 so much because I watched episode 2 and 3 in the middle of my James Dean old Hollywood obsession phase. So I was like, Anakin's just like James Dean. He's so misunderstood and it's great.
Yeah.
I also the misunderstood trope. Yeah. He can only love Padme. So,
Yeah. Well, and this also brings it back to the things that I tend to like versus what I don't like. So the original trilogy is more questy. It's more classic farm boy fantasy because that's what it is. It's farm boy fantasy in space, which is not my thing. I didn't know that was my thing. Whereas the prequels is bodyguard romance and races. They're more intimate settings. You don't travel as much.
Yeah.
They're more claustrophobic.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't know. I probably need to go back into a Star Wars phase. I was pretty obsessed with Star Wars when I was young, but I just kind of got away from me somehow.
It's great. We can do this as The Legends of Luke Skywalker, a collection of short stories by Ken Liu.
Wait, can I?
Nice.
Yes.
I also have the Thrawn trilogy, which I got for my birthday, and I want to listen to the audiobooks because I've been hearing the audiobooks are amazing. So.
Wait, I think I have that too, Joanna.
Also, Star Wars has been leading to lots of fun debates with my partner lately because I really like Rogue One. I think Rogue One's actually legitimately my favorite Star Wars movie, which if you don't know, that's a prequel to episode 4. It's about getting the information that Leia has in episode 4. Yeah. For people who need context. So my partner says this movie's pointless. We know how it ends. And I say, it's not pointless. I'm very emotionally wrecked, even though I know you're right and that I know how it ends.
So, okay, there's Rogue One, which you know how it ends, but it does it well. And then, again, at me, I will fight you. There's Obi-Wan the series. You know what happens with all the freaking characters, and they put the tension in the wrong places.
I have to say, I watched Star Wars in chronological order for the first time, no spoilers. So, I had to, figure out who Anakin was going to become, just, on my own. So, I didn't even know what was going to be happening the whole time.
Yeah.
Huh.
No, we're watching Andor now, and we got into a debate from one scene where he's like, they didn't need to do that. I know this character has to live because he's in this movie. He's like, it was still a really good scene. Shut up. We just have these debates. And I wonder if that's the case in books too, because we have so much plot armor, right? Even with the most ruthless authors, we know some characters have more plot armor than others.
Thank you for bringing it back to books. We could have gone down a spiral of Star Wars stuff.
I mean, we can keep going, but I just felt like Joanna had only
one. It'd be fine. I'd just be out of the conversation, which is fine. But it seems like there's a lot of great short story recommendations in the chat. Thank you, Philip, I've never read Faulkner. I've heard about this author.
He has very long sentences. So if you like long sentences, try it out.
and The Two Hyperions are
I
very
did
different.
Runaway by Alice Munro that he mentioned. I didn't finish it yet though.
Oh, really? You read that,
Mhm.
Alice Munro?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just feel like we should get Joanna to read Her Body and Other Parties because I think she would really like it, and I can always
Me
reread
too.
that.
Yeah, I remember you talking about it, and I think that you recommended it to Evie, or Evie recommended it to you, or
I
you
recommended
recommended
it to Brittany specifically.
There was some kind of weird thing with the three of you where it's like this person recommended to this person, and then this person recommended.
I specifically have video proof of me recommending it to Brittany.
That's
but I'm
what it
sure
was.
I told Evie. I don't know, Evie, did you just read it because you wanted to?
So I read it because Brookline Booksmith was reading her memoir, and I wanted to read the short story collection before the memoir.
They really inform each other. It's
True.
really fascinating. I actually recommend reading those close to each other because you really they feed into each other in terms of what you get out of them.
I want to reread In the Dream House.
It's so good.
I would like to read it physically. I only listened to it on audio, which is fantastic. But I didn't realize that there was a part that was like the choose your own adventure until the book club. And I'm like, wait, what? There was a choose your own adventure?
I think Angela, you're the one that told me that because I listened to it. It was
a
in
choose your own adventure chapter.
Videos, and I was just like, oh.
No, I mean,
I cannot wait
even
for
do
more.
choose your own adventure in an audiobook. That would be
it just chose an ending. So it just took, I don't think it was the shortest path. I think it chose like just one path, but it wasn't the shortest or the longest. I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I will say that I am so excited for Carmen Maria Machado. If anything, if you don't want to do the entire collection, we could buddy read Bloody Summer, which was a short story that Carmen Maria Machado did for the Trespass collection. I think that's what it was called. And I think that just really shows her craft.
I disagree.
Listen,
That's fair. We can disagree. We do it quite often.
It's true.
Yeah. I'm sorry that I'm so behind in the chat, but thank you all for contributing to the chat. I really appreciate it. And
Ava's right. We knew how the Titanic was going to end, but also my partner won't watch Titanic. I just think he has an issue with knowing endings.
So good.
I liked the Titanic when it came out. I haven't watched it since.
Oh, Kev's got an update. He has ascended. I'm assuming that's Malazan related.
Congratulations!
I'm excited to get back into Malazan next year. Book 7's my next one.
Oh, Brittany loved book 7.
Yeah,
that was really good scale.
I had to think about which was it.
Bone Hunters is 6, which I really did like. But I've just been so slumpy this year that I was like, Malazan deserves better than slumpy brain.
Yeah.
I liked book 7 was my favorite out of
the latter half.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, which one's Toll the Hounds? That's the one I need to like hype myself up for.
That one's book no,
that's 8. Dust of Dreams is 9.
Yeah.
Okay. Because Toll the Hounds is one where they tell me the philosophy is dense or there.
That is like a beautifully written book, but yeah, it's not one of my favorites.
Listen, I really like how epic Erikson chooses to be with the magic, and I love the stakes because, as I tell a lot of people, stakes doesn't mean someone has to die. Like, resurrection is a common trope, but consequences can be other things, and I think Erikson does that really well. Because that's my thing, is like, I don't care if I read a whole series and I know no one's going to die. That's one thing. If there's truly, literally no consequences for people doing dumb stuff, like, why are we here?
Well, it also like depends upon the book. Like,
I guess I'm talking in
romance. I imagine no one's going to die there. So,
yeah, I'm talking specifically in the frame of epic fantasy when there are usually these big, grandiose battles and we're saving the day. You know, that trope sphere.
Yeah. Toll the Hounds is dense. It's a pretty thick one.
I love how someone's saying it's fast paced though. So I'm happy for you that it was your perfect book.
Oh, so it was being sarcastic though.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
I can't read sarcasm. I can barely hear it.
I didn't read it either. They had to say that they were being sarcastic.
I love this because now that they're talking about Toll the Hounds, they're going to get in a huge debate about it. It's fun.
I know that one's
it's a very divisive book.
Well, because the people who like that also tend to like House of Chains, right? Because House of Change is currently my least favorite in the first 5.
I don't know about that. I don't know. I think that it seems to me across the fandom, I feel like House of
I love
Change
it.
is often rated the lowest, and that was honestly one of my favorites.
I think House of Chains would be going up on reread for me because I would literally have context for why we were doing what we were doing. Because that was a lot of House of Chains was a lot of, we are being the wizard behind the curtain and no one is telling me what's happening. Like, does that make sense? Like, very Wizard of Oz. Like, I know there are things that are here that are going to have huge payoff or make sense, but they didn't for me in the book within it. And I'm used to Malazan books having a lot of questions that aren't answered, but at least for myself, a satisfying, like, cathartic experience within the novel, which I think is really impressive.
Now, speaking of spoilers, I mean, I know everybody loves rereading Malazan, like that's a whole aesthetic of itself. But just as a first-time reader, I think that's one of the things that always impressed me about each Malazan book. Is I never could have predicted how any of those books ended. Like every single ending to every single one of those books was like, what the heck just happened? It would always completely pull the rug out from under me.
I used to do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
When I would do the reviews or discussions with Andy, and he would say, "So, do you have any predictions?" And I'd be like, "Man, like I'm barely keeping up with what is going on. So no, I'm just buckled in for the ride. Like, I cannot predict. I'm glad I just barely understood this book."
I'm glad
I try really hard on my channel to not give spoilers and more just give my impressions and vibes and experiences, because honestly, that's what I like to hear from people anyways. But with Malazan, that's when I truly realized, okay, sure, sometimes things you say are technically spoils, but context matters, and I could say a lot of stuff at the end of any of those books that no one would remember or understand or get the implications of, because there's so many names and places and people. It's just like
that's
most fantasy. It's just
I've only read Gardens of the Moon, but could I tell you a single thing about what happened? No, because I felt like I went through a whiplash toward the end that I was like, what just happened?
It was so good though. Gardens of the Moon is low key, like, it's not my favorite, but it's in my top 3. I love Gardens of the Moon.
Yeah, that house just springing out of nowhere. Yeah.
I love Gardens of the Moon. Gardens of the Moon was like, yes, be epic fantasy, do the magic, because in a world where magic is leaving the world, my least favorite fantasy trope, because I'm in a world without magic. I don't need this theme. I get it. Tolkien did it the best. We don't need to do this theme anymore. But everyone keeps wanting to do the theme of magic is leaving the world. And to Wheel of Time's credit, magic is coming back. So at least at the reverse.
At least you have that.
Yeah. But no, I just love that first battle scene you see in Gardens of the Moon. I'm just like, oh my God, what is happening? This is so cool.
Yeah.
More people just power creep your magic to these levels. Just do it. Go all out. Like, it was so cool.
It is. That's what I loved about it too. Gardens of the Moon, it wasn't an easy read for me, and it was confusing in parts. And there were parts where I thought, did I understand what I just read? I think I understood it. And at the same time, I think really it was just the atmosphere of that magic. It was so amazing. And just also some of the female characters for me. I'm like, I never read female characters like this before in fantasy. So it was cool.
Yeah.
No, I like Malazan. I know my favorite though is Midnight Tides, which I think is a very basic pick. I don't know.
It's a great book though.
It's really
it's
good.
Amazing.
But that's not hipster at all. Like, I think my Gardens of the Moon pick's a little hipster in terms of where I rank it, but like Midnight Tides, I know everyone loves that one, so, because it's amazing.
Yeah.
I will say, read Jimmy's latest comment. Magic also returns in a Song of Ice and Fire. Shameless plug for the Song of Ice and Fire read-along that Joanna is doing.
I would argue it's returning a tiny bit just to emphasize how much it's left. And I've read all 5 books. So, like, I think it actually uses the trope of we're in a world that is actually going towards magic leaving.
Actually, I think you might be right about that.
Yeah, I've never read the book, so I know.
But I like specifically, I hope this isn't a spoiler to say, but I'll just say dragons.
I read all 5 and I've watched the show, and like, to me, it didn't give me the magicness, and that wasn't the point, and I get that. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not faulting A Song of Ice and Fire for its project, but I like magic in fantasy, because I want magic. I don't know why I have to explain that, but that's what I want.
Yeah.
Like,
I haven't finished listening to it yet, but EP from A Critical Dragon, he did a video with Steven Erickson last week on magic systems in the Malazan world. And my goodness, I'm not very far into it, but it is such a fascinating discussion about how magic is integrated, and I'm probably going to butcher this, but how magic is integrated into the world as opposed to it being this layer on top of the world trying to match our physics and our reality of our current world, where it feels superimposed versus it's just natural. It's just the way of things, almost like another element. And I thought that was so cool. It was such a cool conversation.
Also, Jimmy, I don't think I disagree with that point. So maybe I'm not describing it right. I dislike when I'm in a fantasy book that is always nostalgically looking at the past and how great and legendary and magical things were in the past, and in the present things are lesser. And I think it leans into that more than it leads into the return. But I think I don't disagree with these things you're bringing up. But it's that feeling of, oh, we're not as good as we were in, like, you know, the other era where we had these legendary people and the dragons were so much bigger. And like, it's like, well, why can't I read the book over there?
Yeah, it's the romanticization or whatever. Words are hard.
Which I know is like the point. We do that in history all the time. Like, I get what's happening. I read sci-fi for that type of thinking more so than fantasy. I don't know why. And so in fantasy, I'm just like, but I just want to see cool magic. And also you can be thematically cool. I mean, literally that's why I like Malazan so much, because it's what I always wanted from epic fantasy in terms of being challenging, but also like really cool things are just happening left and right. And we don't try to explain them all perfectly, but we also give like a good foundation for why it might work. Like, it's great. Yeah.
I know what you mean. I get what you're saying, especially with comparing the sci-fi and fantasy, like what you want out of each. Makes sense.
Yeah. So I will say that I've come to realize about myself as a reader that I don't like hard sci-fi. So the more like sci fantasy it is, the more prone I am to enjoy it. So yeah, I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah, I think I don't know. What's some hard sci-fi? Is Leviathan Wakes, would that be hard sci-fi? I don't know.
Space opera. Okay, so that's hard because it's like magic systems where like some people think hard sci-fi has to be grounded in our science. So you are deriving your science fiction based off what could be possible, and it's based a lot in scientific fake fact. Like that's like hard magic systems, I think, is more like hard sci-fi. I'm making things up, so the comments will say I'm wrong. But softer sci-fi is sometimes more sociologically based. You're looking more at societal change. You less care about why, like Asimov, his hard sci-fi really focuses on what if nuclear power became like a really big function in a galactic empire that was descending, and we suddenly have these foundations and stuff like that. So like,
have you read Foundation, Joanna?
I haven't.
Okay.
I know I just have a feeling I would probably love it, but I haven't read it.
I love the first book in that trilogy so much. This is my problem with older sci-fi is I love the first book in so many of those series, and very few of them does that love continue into
That's how I feel about YA fantasy. As I went through a phase where I was reading a lot of YA fantasy, and I just couldn't with any sequel in a YA series. I was like done after book 1.
Well, and like, so Foundation for me, and I won't spoil it, but the Foundation, the first book is so cool. Like, it's like really peak generational sci-fi thought experiments, because Asimov is just a deductive person. Don't go for him for characters, not even for really intense themes. Like, he's just there to be like, here is my question. Here is my answer to this question. Like, that's the type of sci-fi he is. In the second book, he just adds a really weird element that I thought came from left field that changed the project of the work for me. And I think if I reread it, I'd feel better because I would have been prepared for this pivot. But I was not prepared for the pivot, and I was angry. And then the third book, no one talks about a big thing that happens. And I'm like, why are we all okay with what happened in this book? We shouldn't be.
I think I listened to them all back to back, or at least did the last time I read it. And so it blends so much in me. I like the three as like, because I don't think I've read there's like a prequel, right? And then another.
Well, there's a lot. So I'm just talking about the first three.
I think those
were all produced serialized as short stories and like magazines and stuff, and then compiled. Right. So I'm talking in publication order, not chronological order. The first three. Yeah. So because there is a lot more, But I was good after that first 3, and I've read his iRobot short stories, which are fun. I like those.
Yeah. I don't know where my mileage is on hard versus soft sci-fi personally. I know I've definitely loved soft sci-fi. I would think The Vanished Birds leans a little soft.
I was gonna say, so basically, like, The Vanished Birds and Dune are my 2 really only sci-fis that I've read that I've enjoyed.
I thought you liked Hyperion.
And Hyperion. Yeah, you know. That's
That is a sci-fi book. No, that's a sci-fi book.
Here's the thing. Apparently my brain reads something, really enjoys it, forgets, like, tries to, like, justify his existence outside of things that I don't like Frankenstein, technically a sci-fi.
Yeah,
that's true. It is a sci-fi.
I mean, and like, especially because The Vanished Birds, although not written remotely the same as Hyperion or Asimov, it pulls a lot from those 2 books, which is why I love Simon Jimenez, is he pulls a lot of the tropes and things that we read in older sci-fi and that are so, like, monumentally important to the genre, but he writes it in his voice, which is beautiful, puts in diverse representation, and, like, he makes it his own unique work. Like, I don't think most people would notice that The Vanished Birds is so much a love letter to Hyperion, because
in the same way with Spirit Cuts Through Water for fantasy, like, he simultaneously, and it's a weird thing, how can you simultaneously pay homage to this thing while still, like, openly and purposely define aspects of the same genre that you're trying to pay homage to? It's purely genius.
Also, I think The Vanished Birds, although it focuses on societal themes, is actually hard sci-fi. It's traveling technology.
It's true. Yeah.
It's hard sci-fi.
I could see that. I could see a case for that being hard sci-fi.
Everything it does is as hard sci-fi as anything Asimov or Hyperion did.
Yeah. So this is an interesting comment here. Sarah Reed says, I feel like our society is becoming so technologically advanced now that I find sci-fi kind of boring because it's a little bit too close to home. I agree with Angela. Magic is the best. I don't know.
I will say that I actually just read an article, saw something that apparently tangentially related, that we achieved nuclear fusion for the first time.
Really? That sounds familiar.
I mean, I will say my questions that I like being answered in sci-fi are always less how we do a thing. And, like, the number of comments I get on my channel about, oh, I thought you would really like this because of your experience. Like, no, I don't bring my work into my book with me unless it's really, really wrong. See Dark Matter. This is where I get mad. Everyone thinks Dark Matter is a hard sci-fi book. No, it's not. It's magical realism, and everyone needs to understand that. Like, I don't... That box makes less sense than the TARDIS, and the TARDIS doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay? Like...
So, yeah.
I don't even know what...
Go ahead, sorry. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't even know what, like, the more recent sci-fi books are, just because I've been, like, so out of it, I feel like. And then when I was reading sci-fi, like, Red Rising is a sci-fi that's newer that, like, I'm obsessed with, that I love. But then I got so into reading, like, older sci-fis, and there's so many, like, classic sci-fis I still want to read, or just things that have inspired things that I love. And I think, I don't know, I think I really enjoy sci-fi more than fantasy when it comes to older books published. But I feel like I want to check out The Vanished Birds, or what is the other one, The Spirit Cuts Through?
That's fantasy. But I think you would like, if you read The Vanished Birds first, that's the one you're more likely to like. But if you like that, you will like Spirit Cuts Through Water, because you will love his writing.
Okay.
Yeah, he's good. He's a great writer. I think what I was going to say, though, based on what Sarah Reed shared here, is that I think for me, I mean, I think it's partly it's the implications of whatever this technological shift is that is fascinating. So, like the sociological implications, or what's going to happen. Like, I used to love watching that Netflix show. What's it called? Black Mirror? Is that what it's called? Yeah. I haven't watched it in forever, but I watched a few seasons of it. I was pretty obsessed. So I love things like that. Like, I love to see what kind of...
See, so you need to start with sci-fi short stories, because that's what Black Mirror is. It's a bunch of sci-fi short stories.
Yeah.
Just like the Twilight Zone and everything like that.
That there are some episodes in that show that they are very close to home. Like, they're current realities, I think, right now. Like, for example,
that show's a horror to me. It's scary.
it is scary. It is terrifying. It's actually pretty terrifying, like how close to home some of those things are. But,
Also,
These are your 4 options, Joanna.
okay, yeah. It's almost like horror. Sci-fi for me right now, because of what Sarah Reed is saying, is almost like reality and horror. You know, it's real day horror.
also,
But at the same time, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Eric was talking about how neuromancer predicted stuff, but not cell phones. That's something I like reading with classic sci-fi that I think's fun, because you really get a view into where the decade was thinking things were going when that book was written. And I just think that's fun. Like, Asimov thought nuclear power was going to be the thing. Everyone was obsessed with robots and AI, but no one... There was like a few authors, obviously, but like it wasn't a big trend to predict a cell phone. Social media first comes up in my head in a popular book in Hyperion. Even that's not exactly where we are now. It's just like so cool to see where the group think.
It's been a long time since I read it, but 2001 Space Odyssey, I feel like that book, it did bring up like iPads or tablets, something along those lines. That's what it brought up for me when I was reading it. What? How did he know? There are a lot of things like that, I think, in classic sci-fi that are cool to see. And of course,
Neuromancer for me was a really hard book to read. Like, it was very interesting, but it was very challenging. And
it sounds hard.
Yeah.
My partner read it, and I asked him if he thought I would like it, and he said, nah, so I'm probably not going to read it.
Yeah,
opinion.
I would read it with a teacher.
Yeah, that one intimidates me. Mm-hmm.
I will say that the only piece of creative sci-fi, debatably sci-fi, that I've consumed that has predicted some sort of future, at least in my past, and now I see the results of it, is Xenon Girl of the 21st Century. So,
and this is actually one I really want to get to, Sun Eater. So I was talking about this over on the Fantasy Network last Friday because I can't decide. I really want to go into Sun Eater or the 3-body problem. And so I asked Jimmy, and it was so funny because the chat was like, 3-body problem, Sun Eater, 3-body problem, Sun Eater. So those are 2 more current sci-fi series, Brittany, since you were asking about that.
Okay.
That everybody seems to be talking about right now.
Sun Eater right now.
Yeah, I've heard comparisons of Sun Eater to Dune. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's looking like I'll get to read that next year. We're doing a read along on my Patreon, and that's currently been winning by a mile.
I read that.
Yeah. The Empire Silence.
I was Googling it because I couldn't figure out what it was. Empire of Silence.
You did? Did you like it?
It reminds me of the Name of the Wind more than Dune. You know, I did not enjoy it when I read it. I know that's a really unpopular opinion because I found the main character detestable.
Yeah.
Like, I really just could not stand the main character. But I mean, I don't have like strong criticisms about the book. I just didn't get along with the main character. So I think that's why I didn't enjoy the rest of the book.
Yeah. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people say that the character is not a likable character. And a lot of people say that the first book, I've heard a lot of people say, well, a lot of people love the first book, but I've also heard a lot of people say that the first book is mid and that the second book is where it really takes off.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's totally, it might not be your thing though, too.
No, but I want Brittany to reread Ruin of Kings over that if she chooses to reread one of those 2 books. So we're not going to encourage this.
I do think about it.
What's Ruin? Oh, Ruin of Kings. Oh, is that the Jen
Lyons?
Yeah, it's Chorus of Dragons. It's so fun.
Oh, and that was the book I passed up on that.
I finished it.
Box thing. And everybody said, you are missing out. I got so many people ranting at me about that.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to try out Sun Eater. I hope I really like it. That's always my hope. We'll see. So yeah. Yeah, Sun Eater is one of them that I'm interested in. It looks like it has a lot of fantasy elements. That's what I hear too, that it's more like a sci-fantasy. I keep hearing that especially the sequel to that series is one of the best sequels. And then some people love the 3rd and 4th book even more. So I guess I get the impression it gets better and better and better as you go on. But then again, it is in first person. So if you don't like that character, I could see that being a negative factor. I think that was what Jimmy told me too. He said, if you really can't get into that character, then that might be a pass. Yeah, I mean, that has happened to me before. And it's interesting because some first persons don't bother me at all, even if I don't like the character. But sometimes it's more just like, the author is too good at making them have like consistent thought patterns that I find like really annoying. I'm just like, your decision tree is flawed, and I know why your decision tree is flawed, but I would like you to have a new decision tree now and do new things. And I'm not talking about Fitz, I'm talking about a different first person character.
Yeah.
I like a lot of unlikable characters. Like I enjoy reading from unlikable characters' perspectives, but sometimes, once in a while it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
it just
Parable of the
depends.
Sower and Talents was really good, and I really like when authors do that. Butler is a great classic sci-fi author that more people don't read. Like, people have been reading her more now, but they like read Kindred, which is like one of her first books. It's not her debut, but it's like her second or third. And they read like Parable of the Sower and Talents, which is like her later works, and they like skip the entire middle.
I
I've only
I totally forgot Xenogenesis trilogy is sci-fi. I like
Correct.
that.
It has
I love
aliens, Evie. It has
that. I know.
I've only read Kindred, but I for me, it's also the fact that I am such a I'm such a huge lover of time travel stories.
Yeah.
So.
No, and that one, the show just dropped today, and I really want to watch it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Kindred, the show it should be on Hulu if you have access.
Aaron doesn't want to watch it. If you want to group watch it.
Okay. It's going to be 6 episodes. I don't know how long each episode is, but it's all out. It's a mini series for Kindred.
That might be fun. That might be fun to group watch it because I'm terrible about watching things, but maybe if I group watch
and it's
something.
Also like, I read that book and I'm like, this is like an episode of Black Mirror. That's what that book felt like to me.
I need a new show because I'm like devastated now that Wednesday I finished it, and
I need to watch that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we are at about 2 hours, just over actually 2 hours and 6 minutes. And I know that some of us have to get on to do some other things. So I think we're going to go ahead and end it here for the night, but I'll just go ahead and let my guests give some closing thoughts on anything you want to share. Any closing thoughts. I'll start with Angela.
Happy early birthday, Brittany. That's all I have.
Oh, yes. We have 2 birthdays.
Yeah.
Happy early birthday, Angela.
That's right. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the episode. Shame on me.
No.
We have 2 birthday people in the group tonight. So everybody in the chat, if you want to, please wish Angela and Brittany a happy birthday.
Wait, are you guys born on the same day?
No, but we're very close.
Okay.
So Angela, your birthday is on Thursday?
Yep, I'm Thursday. Yep.
And Brittany, yours is on Saturday? Sunday. Oh,
Yeah.
I was close. Close. Okay.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah.
No, it's a great birthday week. Actually, it's been like kind of interesting, but I'm riding it. Birthday weeks are always fun. I can get through the low points easier.
And everybody's wishing you all a happy birthday in the chat. Thank you all so much. And so, we'll have a happy birthday, Angela. Yay.
But that's all I have. I have nothing to like really
Fantastic.
plug. I guess you can watch my channel if you want to.
And Angela does also really, really great videos on anticipated reads, like not anticipated reads, but on, you probably do that too, but on videos.
I don't actually. I hate doing those.
On recent, what is it?
Recent releases.
I call them recent release roundups, where I go through not everyone's. I go through a lot of reviews for books that are buzzy, and then
it's really brilliant what she does because she goes through a lot of booktube reviews and she explains what different people or different reviewers said about a new release, so you could decide for yourself based on different people's opinions, whether you want to pick up the book or not. I love it. I think it's fantastic.
It's also a great way to find out who new booktubers are, because I've met a lot of new booktubers that way. I mean, that's how I met Roger, because he had a review for like City of Dusk.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for you to bring back Science Behind the Magic, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's another great series that Angela has.
Spoons. Where are the spoons, Evie?
Buy more spoons.
And Evie, thank you so much for joining us. Any final thoughts?
I don't really do videos, although I'm debating on if I want to do like year-end stuff. I do just a lot of discussions. So, I mean, if there's a book you guys want to discuss and I'm reading it, I'm more than happy to host something. But I'm just going to be corporate shill of Spirit Cuts Through Water. Please, dear God, read this book.
Show those end pages. Show the end pages.
Oh, that'll suck me in.
Look at these end pages.
I am literally getting tattoos of the tortoise and the spear. So, yeah,
this
it's
so pretty.
I know.
It's so pretty.
That's
Beautiful.
the vibe of the book. That art is the vibe.
It turns out that the guy who did the illustrations for the in pages is also an author. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
I
interesting.
mean, if you like doing art, do it in all the forms you can.
And we have the dog.
Oh, hello. Max, right?
Yes. He's like, it is 9:00, Mom. It's bedtime. So
right. Well, thank you, Evie. And Evie sometimes does live reading sprints too, so you could tune in for those. I've joined a couple of those, so that's fantastic. And Brittany, any final thoughts?
Just thanks for having me. It's fun to chat with you guys and catch up. And I'm hoping to film like maybe one video by the end of the year. So
I mean, if you do, I will be ecstatic. You know that, but also you do you. You know, I'll wake up in the morning and be like, Brittany gave me a video.
I loved your suggestion in the comments box on Instagram. I liked your suggestion, so I might go with something like that.
Oh, I gotta hear.
Remind me what I suggested.
You suggested like books, like the happiest moments or something like that. Or
yeah,
like,
I wanted you to focus on moments, less on favorites, because I know favorites lists are hard for you.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to be not making tons of like rules and lists and all those things. So
yeah, just like randomly like write down your top 5 moments, or like the 5 moments that come to mind, and just ramble about that.
Oh, I love that idea. I love that idea.
Everyone take it. I won't be doing it because that's not enough structure for me, but feel free.
You know, I love that idea though, because especially like when it comes to ranking books and series, I always feel like, well, I loved the beginning of this book and I loved the middle of the I'm always all over the place with what I feel about that. But I do love that idea, and I think that would be great. And I know Brittany has a wonderful Instagram that she's very interactive on right now too, right? So you can check out that too. And happy birthday to Brittany too.
Yay. I'm just so happy you invited her here because I haven't gotten to hang out with Brittany in so long.
I know, I miss it.
Yay.
Little by little, hopefully coming back. So
whatever is comfortable, obviously. I'm selfish. I just wake up in the morning and no one's posting booktube videos in the morning right now. And you used to be my staple.
I'm just glad I did this. I was nervous to come like be in front of a camera again. So glad I was able to do it.
It's always wonderful to hear you talk about books. So I'm happy. I'm so happy that you made the time. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who showed up in the chat. I'm sorry that I was not the best at keeping up with the chat this time, but I really appreciated all the comments, and I'll go back and read all of the ones I missed. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great rest of your evening. Bye-bye.